My name is Sarah Whitman. I'm 30 years old, and all my life, I've tried to be the kind one in a family that only needed me to be quiet. That night, they asked me to come home because they wanted to talk. No one said it was an intervention. But when I walked into the living room, my parents were already seated, and my sister Rachel had her arms crossed, her eyes colder than ice. Even my best friend Emily was there, avoiding my gaze like she already knew what was about to happen but didn't have the courage to stop it. "Sarah, you're toxic," Rachel said. "Always playing the victim, always demanding that everyone understand you." My dad nodded. My mom added, "You need serious psychological help. You're not stable anymore." I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask why. I simply pulled out my phone and played a recording they thought had been deleted forever. It was my father's voice, clear and unmistakable, discussing how to forge documents to transfer my grandmother's scholarship fund from my name to my sister's. No one said a word after that. The room went still, as if time had stopped. I stood, picked up my small bag, and walked out. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. Have you ever had your entire family stage a performance just to erase you from their lives? Have you ever been the only one standing up for the truth, only to be labeled the troublemaker? If you've ever been called too sensitive simply because you feel deeply, leave a comment below. Like this video if you've ever stayed silent in the face of injustice. And hit subscribe to hear the full story because what happened after I walked out was when I truly began to exist. I left that house with light steps but a heavy chest. I carried nothing but a canvas bag, my phone, and the recording I should have never had to make. It was Friday night, and the wind was cold along the old neighborhood streets of suburban Street Louis, where I grew up. Once, the air there smelled like fresh apple pie in the oven, and my grandmother's laughter drifting from the old radio in the kitchen. But all of that had faded into dust in my memory. I used to be the child the whole block was proud of. Straight-A student, full-ride scholarship to Missouri State University. The only daughter in the family whose picture was featured in the local paper, whose photo was framed next to my dad's decades-old awards in the living room. But after Grandma Evelyn's funeral, the woman who had planted faith in me like a rare seed in barren soil, everything began to shift. They said I changed. My mother would sigh whenever she saw me sitting silently by the window, my eyes clouded from grief. "She's always so cold now," she once said to a relative over dinner. My dad just stayed quiet, as if agreement was the easiest way to keep the peace. And Rachel, my sister, scrolled through her phone, not bothering to look up. We used to be close, Rachel and I. We used to sit on the couch watching cartoons, sharing popcorn from the same bowl. But after Evelyn passed, the gap between us widened like a crack in an old wall, and no one tried to patch it. Rachel started growing her social media presence, live streaming life coaching sessions and sharing emotional wellness tips in videos framed with dried flowers and candlelight. I watched one of them once. In it, she talked about the healing power of family. That sentence landed in my ears like a cruel joke. Her Resilient Heart Studio launched right after the Evelyn Foundation was mentioned in the papers. Not long after, I was asked to step down from the advisory board Grandma had appointed me to. They said I wasn't on brand. I had written dozens of curriculum guides for the Scholarship Center. I stayed up many nights creating those materials, never once imagining I'd be pushed out of the very thing I helped build. After that, I was invited to fewer family meetings. The birthday party for our cousin's kid, which I had hosted the year before, didn't have my name on the guest list. My mother said, "You're too intense lately. People just want to have a light-hearted get-together." I tried not to get angry. Told myself maybe they were busy, maybe I was overthinking. But not every doubt is paranoia. The truth is, they needed someone picture-perfect to show the world. And me, with tired eyes from overworking, no glossy photos, no cheerful anecdotes, became inconvenient. The last time I was invited to dinner at home was Thanksgiving last year. Rachel came in wearing a sweater that said, "Healing is hot," beaming as she pulled my mom into a live stream like it was a reality show. When she saw me mashing potatoes in the kitchen, she walked by and casually said, "Sarah, maybe take a break, okay? Your vibe is kinda dragging everyone down." My mom didn't defend me. She just adjusted the tablecloth and said, "She's just trying her best. Rachel, don't be too harsh." But she didn't look me in the eyes when she said it. They didn't need to yell to make me disappear. They just had to talk like I wasn't there. I started withdrawing not out of anger, but from exhaustion. I no longer wanted to defend myself in every conversation. No longer wanted to prove I was fine. Every time I brought up being removed from the scholarship board, my mom would deflect. "Don't overthink it." They just wanted to explore a new direction. But I wasn't imagining things. I had seen the forged signature. I had seen my program content renamed and published on Rachel's platform as if it were her own work. I once confronted my mom about it. In the kitchen, among the smell of morning coffee and the soft yellow light. "Did you know about this?" I asked, showing her a side-by-side comparison of the two versions. She set her coffee mug down too hard. "Are you trying to tear this family apart?" she asked, not looking at the papers. "No," I replied. "I just want the truth." "You always make everything so complicated," she murmured. "You can't forgive. You can't forget. Isn't it tiring to live like that?" I gave a sad smile. Forgiveness happens when someone admits they were wrong, but I'd never heard an apology. No one had ever asked how it felt to watch my work be taken from me. Even Emily, my best friend since high school, began to pull away. After Rachel brought her on as a communications advisor for her studio, Emily became distant. Her texts grew shorter, her replies more polite but colder. I don't blame her. Everyone has to choose a side to survive, but I chose not to play that game anymore. Grandma Evelyn once told me during a winter evening when I was 16, after a teacher unfairly removed me from a group project, "You don't have to shout to be heard. But when you speak, let the truth echo on its own." Her voice, gentle like a river, stayed with. To me that night, when Rachel called me harmful, toxic, I just needed to press play on that recording. And just as Grandma taught me, the truth was loud enough on its own. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to walk away. And not to wait for them to call me back, but to begin living on my own terms. I still remember clearly it was a chilly Friday afternoon in March, clouds rolling over like something unspoken was brewing. I got the text from my mom around noon. She wrote simply, "Can you stop by this afternoon? The family wants to talk things out." I had thought about not going. Something deep in my gut warned me, but part of me still hoped. Maybe they had come to understand something. Maybe after months of silence, someone was ready to say they were sorry. I thought of the warmth in Grandma Evelyn's eyes when I used to visit, the kind of gaze that said everything without a single word. Maybe if I held on just a little longer, things would fall back into place. I was wearing the light gray sweater, the kind my grandmother used to knit for me back in college. It fit a little snug around the shoulders, but I could never bring myself to get rid of it. I drove through those old streets, palms damp on the steering wheel. When I got there, Rachel's car was already parked out front. I spotted Emily's too. That only deepened my suspicion. The door opened. My mother stood there, lightly made up, but there was a tension in her expression. She didn't hug me. Just tilted her head and said softly, "Come in. Everyone's waiting for you." I stepped into the living room and saw the entire family already seated. My dad had his arms crossed. Rachel sat up straight like she was preparing to testify on camera, and Emily sat at the edge of the couch, clutching her bag, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second before turning away. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Rachel spoke first. "Sarah, we're holding this because we're worried about you. You've been isolating yourself, and it's making everyone concerned." I looked around. Concerned? Or planning something I'm not aware of? My dad let out a heavy sigh. "This isn't an interrogation. We just want to help you." I turned to Emily. "And you? You think I need to be helped too?" She bit her lip, hesitant. I just want what's best for you." Rachel produced a stack of papers. "We've gathered some materials from a licensed psychologist. Several of your recent behaviors are troubling. Emotional instability, social withdrawal, and especially possessive actions controlling intellectual property you're not equipped to manage. I blinked. Intellectual property? Yes, she continued calmly. The Evelyn Foundation program can't continue if it's tied to someone mentally unfit. I let out a dry laugh. So what's the plan? Falsify a psychological record to change the name of the director? Rachel looked me dead in the eye. I don't want to do anything. But you've hurt Mom. You've thrown everything into chaos. You're no longer the person Grandma Evelyn trusted. I have to act. My mother chimed in, her voice quiet but firm. You need to accept treatment. We have a private doctor. If you cooperate, everything will stay peaceful. I turned away, trying to steady my breath. Every word they spoke felt like another nail in a box they'd already built to bury me. And if I don't cooperate? I asked slowly. We'll have to petition the court to reevaluate your authority over the scholarship fund, Rachel said without hesitation. I sat down, opened my bag, and took out my phone. I pulled up a voicemail I'd saved from a missed call a few weeks ago. My father's voice played clearly, needing no explanation. Rachel, we have to move fast. If we don't get the name changed before the next review period, the fund stays under her. Your mom's been holding those papers all this time now, it's time to use them. I placed the phone in the middle of the table. The entire room went silent. No one dared look at me. I slipped the phone back into my bag and stood. I came here thinking this was a conversation. Turns out it was a trial without a lawyer. My mother called out, Sarah, don't misunderstand. I didn't look back. No, I understand perfectly. I walked out, shutting the door behind me with hands that were still trembling slightly. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. Just an expanding emptiness in my chest, like I had just witnessed myself being exiled from my family deliberately and coldly. On the way back, I stopped at the old gas station where Grandma and I used to stop every weekend. I sat on the wooden bench beside the vending machine, watching the sunset melt over the low-roofed buildings in the distance. Rachel's words echoed in my head. You're no longer the person, Grandma. Trusted. I pulled out a small slip of paper from my wallet, something Grandma Evelyn once wrote in blue ink. You don't need to raise your voice to be believed. You only need to stand firm so you're not silenced. I gently gripped the note in my palm, and in that moment, between the wind and the smell of gasoline, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Not to win anyone's approval, but to protect what I had built line by line, page by page, something no one had the right to erase. I left the house I had called home for 30 years with slow, steady steps. No one tried to stop me. No one spoke. Just the sound of the door closing behind me, a sound that echoed in my chest like a final bell, marking the end of something that had long since rotted. The early spring wind slipped through the thin sweater, but I didn't shiver. My hand stayed firm on the fabric strap of my bag. Inside it, the small phone, sitting quiet, almost like it knew its part in the confrontation, was complete. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The road from my parents' house to the corner gas station was less than 2 miles, but that night, it felt endless in my mind. For years, I had lived inside a shell of silence. Every dinner swallowed without protest, every avoided gaze, every time I was called too sensitive for defending my views. And now that the truth was out, they still didn't react. Not because they were shocked, but because they already knew. They just never expected me to flip the board. I sat down on the wooden bench outside the gas station. The little coffee shop next door had already turned off its lights. Everything around me seemed frozen, except the memories swirling in my head. I remembered the look in my mother's eyes when I played the recording. There was no anger, no shock, just resignation, as if she had braced for this moment but didn't have the strength to stop it. My father wore the same expression, the look of a man too tired to face the truth. Rachel didn't speak. She just shifted her chair back slightly, fingers tapping her knee, eyes flickering but still arrogant. I once believed that if I had enough proof, they'd back down or at least admit they were wrong. But no, they chose silence. Silence, for them, was the final weapon, a way to deny without responding, a way to erase without leaving a mark. I leaned back against the bench, reaching for the small leather wallet that held the note from Grandma Evelyn. The slanted handwriting in blue ink was still clear, even after all this time. You don't need anyone's recognition to know you're valuable. I had kept it ever since she passed. Not as a motto to live by, but as a silent promise I once swore to fulfill. I opened my phone and scrolled through the archive of notes I had saved. Drafts of lesson plans I wrote during sleepless nights. Refined SAT prep outlines from hundreds of trial sessions. Every document was sweat, effort, and intellect, poured into growing the scholarship fund they now wanted to rip from my hands like it was disposable. I wasn't famous. I didn't have tens of thousands of followers like Rachel, but I had data. I had timestamps. I had records. And I had something she could never fake. I had the originals. I opened a folder labeled Evelyn Curriculum Archive. Inside were dozens of PDFs, PowerPoints, spreadsheets, learning progress charts, annotated guides. Each file was time-stamped, each one marked with my name. I had been too cautious not because I distrusted my family, but because I loved my work so much, I couldn't bear to let anyone damage it. There was a chime from the old clock hanging in the cafe. I stood up, picked up my phone, and walked toward the rundown room I'd rented a few blocks away. The streetlight cast my shadow across the brick pavement, long and thin, like my presence in that family. When I unlocked the door, the scent of old paint and damp carpet hit me. I didn't turn the light on right away. I sat down on the floor, my back against the wall, and turned on my phone screen again. No messages, no calls, no apologies. I replayed the recording. I listened to every word my father said, every hesitation, every time Rachel brought up mental instability. I saved the audio in 3 different places: iCloud, an external hard drive, and my encrypted personal inbox. I wasn't going to let it become a hostage in anyone else's hands. Then I started writing. I opened my laptop, created a new document, and titled it Evidence of Intellectual Property Theft. System Overview. I listed every step they took, every red flag I ignored, every time I was removed from group emails. I backed up every message I had sent to the Evelyn Foundation's board that never got a reply. I didn't write out of anger. I wrote with the calm of someone who had endured enough, with the quiet voice of a woman who no longer needed permission. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat there in the dark, the steady click of the keyboard filling the silence, as if each sentence I typed was another brick rebuilding myself. Not to tear anyone down, but to declare that I was still here, not erased, not silenced, not absent from what I had created. The room I rented was tucked behind an old bus stop. The iron hotel sign outside creaked with rust whenever the wind picked up. Inside, the narrow hallway was lined with dark green carpet, stained by time. The man at the front desk asked, without looking up from the tiny television playing local news, "Weekly or nightly?" "4 nights," I answered, placing my wallet on the counter. He handed me a worn plastic keycard and gave a distracted nod. That was all I needed. Room 203 sat at the end of the hallway, next to the emergency stairwell. The wood on the door frame was scratched, the handle loose, but I didn't care. Inside was a double bed with a thin beige blanket, a small desk with a lamp missing its shade, a 3-drawer wooden dresser, and a bathroom that was old but clean. Nothing unfamiliar, nothing comforting. I set my bag down in the corner and gently pulled out the wooden box. It was heavier than I remembered. The varnish had dulled with age, but the hinges were still solid. I opened the lid. The scent of old paper and damp wood rose up, softening something inside me. Inside the box were letters Evelyn had written to me, many still unopened. A few black and white photographs, a small notebook filled with lesson planning notes in her handwriting, and one envelope in ivory paper marked with my name, Sarah, written in a delicate but steady hand. I had never read it. I was afraid of what I might find, afraid it would say something I couldn't recover from. I touched the envelope, cold and soft. Then I opened it. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, you may be in a place where it feels like no one remembers who you are, what you've done, or how deeply you deserve love. I can't be there to hold you, but I can remind you of this. Don't just survive, Sarah. Build. You have something not everyone in our family does: resilience that doesn't require applause. Don't let anyone call you weak for being able to feel. Don't let them say you aren't strong just because you don't make noise. Since you were little, I knew you wouldn't take the easy road. And I also knew you were wise enough, good enough, and quiet enough to make that road meaningful. Build, Sarah. Not for applause. Not to prove anything. Just to stay true to yourself. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the desk by the window. Outside, the streetlight cast a faint glow into the room. I pulled my laptop from the cloth bag, plugged it in, and sat on the edge of the bed. In the corner of the screen, a folder still waited. Evelyn Curriculum, Archive. I opened it, scrolling through each file. Lesson titles appeared like chapters of a book written with my whole heart. Sessions on advanced reading comprehension, vocabulary exercises by category, sample essays I'd written for students with learning gaps. Each word was the product of sleepless nights and careful revisions. I remembered a particular student, anxious and withdrawn, and how I had created an entirely new approach just to help them feel seen. None of it was rushed, none of it copied. But now, those same lessons had been reimagined into Rachel's Life Prep Academy, a program she marketed for nearly $1,000 per term. Not a single mention of where the content came from. I took a deep breath, not to calm down, to awaken the part of me that had been silent too long. I opened my email and typed a subject line: Copyright Registration, Evelyn Curriculum. I attached all the files, timestamp records, work logs, and Evelyn's handwritten notes. I sent it to a lawyer. She had once introduced me to a woman who had handled the Foundation's legal work. Not long after, a reply appeared. Short, but exactly what I needed. Received. I'll begin review and assist with confirmation of ownership. Evelyn kept a legal record naming the heir to the curriculum. I'll check the archive. I leaned against the wall. In that moment, I didn't feel alone. I felt like I was restarting something that had been paused. Then I opened a tutoring platform I used years ago when I was a grad student. I updated my profile with a new description: SAT and ACT prep, academic skills, critical thinking, special focus on students with attention issues and performance anxiety. Under About Me, I typed, I don't teach to make students the best. I teach so they can believe they can. I clicked Update Profile and let the screen glow. Soon, a trial session request popped up. A parent in Oklahoma was looking for someone to guide their son through his senior year. I clicked to reply, typed a simple greeting, scheduled a Monday, 9 a.m. session. I closed the laptop and walked toward the window. The yellow streetlight spilled across the desk where Evelyn's letter still rested. I took a small card and taped it above the workspace. Next to it, I pinned a scrap of paper, handwritten in black ink: Rebuild, not to prove, but to continue. I stared at it for a long time. Not to feel inspired, but to remind myself that from here on out, everything I do isn't for them to notice. It's so I don't lose myself again. I sat at the desk in the dim room, the soft light from the lamp casting a small glow across the old wooden surface. In that quiet space, I opened a browser and typed Life Prep Academy into the search bar. The site loaded instantly. A sleek, professional page in navy blue and pale gold. A banner showed smiling students under bright classroom lights. Beneath it, bold letters read, Your journey to college starts here. I scrolled slowly, heart tightening with each section. Lessons on high-level reading strategies. Essay writing guides built on the 3-point concentric model. Vocabulary worksheets sorted by theme. This wasn't just inspiration. It was replication line for line, section by section, from the materials I had crafted with care over 3 long years. Even the appendix, my private notes for accommodating students with learning challenges, was nearly identical. I paused at a video preview. Rachel stood in a beige classroom. Behind her, a whiteboard with a mind map exactly like the one I once sketched with a dry erase marker on library printer paper when I taught those first sessions. We believe that every student is a universe of their own, and with the right system, they will shine in their own way. That quote wasn't Rachel's. It was something I wrote in the introduction of the integrated thinking curriculum. Evelyn once tweaked it a little to print on the back cover of the guidebook, saying it was the line that I convinced her I was born to teach. I leaned back in my chair, fingers still resting on the keyboard, as if letting go even slightly would cause everything to shatter. But I didn't cry. I wasn't angry anymore. What remained was a chilling clarity. I had been robbed of the most important thing in the most brazen, ruthless way. I clicked on the Legal Information tab. At the bottom, it read, Life Prep Academy is a registered trademark of R.E. Whitmore Holdings. I froze at those three initials. R.E. Whitmore. Rachel Evelyn Whitmore. She had used Evelyn's name to legitimize the brand. I picked up my phone and called the law office that had represented my grandmother during the creation of the Evelyn Foundation. The receptionist answered, her voice gentle but cautious. I introduced myself, and she responded, You're Evelyn's granddaughter, right? I recall your name being mentioned in a few documents she kept separately. I took a deep breath. I need to confirm. Ownership rights over the educational programs I co-developed with my grandmother. I believe they are currently being used without permission. The receptionist asked me to send all relevant documents and said she would forward them to the lead attorney, Marla Hendricks. I thanked her and hung up, then began drafting an email. I attached every draft, every version saved with timestamps, and a scanned copy of the handwritten letter Evelyn gave me when I graduated. In it, she clearly stated I was the co-designer of the program, with full rights to continue developing and modifying it as needed. I returned to the Life Prep site, scrolled through the comments section. Praise, glowing reviews, parents thanking the program for their children's academic improvements. But nestled among them, I spotted a familiar name, Chloe R., one of my former students. She had studied with me for 3 consecutive summers and had once sent a handwritten card after earning a full-ride scholarship. I opened her social media page. A recent post popped up. It's painful to watch someone else showcase the work of another, as if they created it. Miss Sarah, if you're reading this, I still remember our sessions at the library. I still remember your words. We learned to figure out how to think, not just memorize answers. My throat tightened. Not from pain, but from the realization that amid all the silence, someone remembered. I messaged Chloe a short thank you. No questions, just so she'd know I'd seen it. That night, as the city gradually quieted down, I sat up and spread all the documents across my floor. I pinned each page onto the wooden board, leaning against the wall, something I'd borrowed from my landlord. I drafted a roadmap for my legal response, lined up evidence chronologically, and in the center, I taped Evelyn's words. Build, Sarah. No one else has to believe, as long as you do. I looked at everything I had built in the dark. No major platform, no PR network. But I had persistence, I had a method, and now I had proof that someone else was selling my work for a premium under their own name, legally. If they chose the law to legitimize their theft, I would use that same path to bring the truth into the light. I wasn't knocking on doors to reclaim my dignity. I would push that door open myself. And if I had to, I'd tear the hinges off. I reopened my old laptop after charging it, the pale blue screen casting a glow onto the quiet, low ceiling of my rented room. It wasn't fully dark yet outside, but the sidewalk was almost empty. I had just sent the email to attorney Marla Hendricks and was combing through every folder of archived files, one by one, like some instinct was urging me, something still hidden. A folder named Evelyn, Final, Docs, sat deep within a synced cloud drive I had once backed up from an external hard disk. It didn't appear by default only when I typed the name manually. I must have saved it in haste after Evelyn passed, then avoided it out of grief. Inside were 3 files. One was the Foundation's annual activity guide. Another was Evelyn's notes on intellectual property transfers. The last a PDF labeled Addendum 2021, signed. I clicked it open. My eyes stopped at the bold heading, Addendum to Will, Evelyn Grace, Whitmore, March 2021. I held my breath as the line beneath it appeared. I, Evelyn Grace Whitmore, need in full sound mind and of my own free will, add this clause to the original will signed on June 7, 2018. I declare that all curriculum content, teaching models, training programs, and any materials developed under the Evelyn Foundation's educational initiatives shall be transferred exclusively to my granddaughter, Sarah Ellen Whitmore. I trust in Sarah's capabilities, integrity, and educational vision. No one else, including members of my family, shall have the right to own, use, replicate, or commercialize any of the above without Sarah's written consent. I sat still. My hand hovered over the mouse, unmoving. The words before me felt like a curtain being drawn open after months of being shoved into darkness. I scrolled down. Her signature. 2 witnesses, one I recognized as her attorney, the other a local court clerk. I clicked print, my hand trembling slightly. The small printer next to the desk began humming, each sheet sliding out with a dry, deliberate sound, like the heartbeat of someone slowly coming back to life. I laid the printouts flat on the desk, smoothing them not because they were creased, but because I needed to feel their presence, to be sure they were real. Then I discovered something else. In the adjacent file was a scanned image. A postal receipt. Evelyn's handwriting clearly noted the delivery address, 78 Rosemont Drive, my parents' house. The date sent, March 16th, just 2 weeks before she was hospitalized after a stroke. I zoomed into the handwritten side note in blue ink. Original sent to Sarah. Duplicate sent to Verena for safekeeping. Verena. My mother. She had received it, and she had chosen silence. There was no mistaking it. No, I forgot. No, I didn't notice. The postmark, the handwriting, it was all there. I shot up from my chair, not to do anything in particular, just because I couldn't sit still. I walked to the window, flung it open, letting the cold April air rush into the cramped room, thick with thoughts colliding in my head. I remembered clearly after Evelyn's funeral, my mother once came into my room as I was packing Evelyn's belongings. She sat on the edge of my bed, gently stroked an old photo of us taken at an award ceremony when I was in 12th grade. "Don't get too hung up on paperwork," she had said. "Evelyn loved you. That much is clear. But the Scholarship Foundation needs someone who can handle the weight." Back then, I thought she was trying to comfort me. But now, every word she said slammed it into me with their true meaning, ones she never admitted. They had received official proof that I was Evelyn's chosen successor for her educational work, and they had chosen to bury it, not out of ignorance, but intention. I returned to the desk, pinning the printed will addendum and postal receipt to the wooden board already covered in documents. Surrounding them were curriculum originals, instructional blueprints, scanned letters from Evelyn. I picked up my phone and called Marla's law office. "Hello, Sarah," the receptionist answered, calm as ever. "I just found a scanned copy of my grandmother's signed will addendum and a postal receipt showing it was sent to my mother's address," I said, each word deliberate. "That's excellent," she replied. "Please send everything to us. We'll verify the legal validity and, if needed, request the original files from the court for notarization." Would this be grounds for legal action? She has every right to file a formal opposition against the trademark ownership being misused and demand compensation if the content has been illegally commercialized. I hung up the phone and sat back down, not to rest, but to start planning in the language they once used to erase me, the language of legal clauses, deadlines, obligations, and rights. I opened my email, attached the newly scanned document, and sent it to Marla with a simple subject line: "I'm ready to begin." I looked up at the board on my wall, white sheets, every piece of evidence, every stroke of ink no longer there to prove anything to anyone, but to remind me I was never stripped of my rights. I had just reclaimed them, and I would hold on to them with everything I had, even if the other side chose to stay silent, because silence was no longer enough to bury what was already clear. 3 days after I sent all the documents to Marla's law office, a strange email appeared in my work inbox. The subject: temporary suspension of trademark copyright claim from R.E. Whitmore Holdings. I opened it. My eyes froze on the first paragraph. We've been notified that the website using the domain name sarahwhitmoreprep.com is currently using the term prep in a manner that may cause confusion with the legally registered trademark Life Prep Academy. Under Article 43 of the Intellectual Property Code, we request that the above website be suspended during the verification process. At the bottom was the digital signature of Rachel's representing attorney. I leaned back in my chair, not surprised. I had expected it. But when it actually came, there was still a bitter sting in my throat. I quickly typed in the address of the site I use to manage student accounts, host online classes, and run SAT tutoring sessions. A blank screen appeared. Site temporarily suspended pending investigation. My phone buzzed. A message from Henry, a 12th grader I was helping with his college essay. Miss Sarah, I can't access my account anymore. Everything's gone. What happened? Then another from Chloe. Our classroom page is locked. I have to submit my application next week. Are you okay? I responded to each of them calmly, reassuring them it was just a technical issue and I would send materials through temporary emails. But inside, I could see exactly what they were doing, cutting me off from the very foundation I had built with my own hands. Less than 2 hours later, Stripe sent a notification. Withdrawal rights temporarily restricted due to a legal dispute involving course content. I looked at the number in the account, more than $3,800 in prepaid student tuition, now frozen. I couldn't withdraw, couldn't refund, couldn't use it to pay the rent due next week. She knew. Rachel knew I had no safety net. She didn't need to win immediately. She just needed to keep me suffocating long, enough to make me give up. That night, I got home late after photocopying more documents at the public library. I had just set my bag down when my phone rang. It wasn't a student. It was from an old classmate, Lila, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Have you seen Rachel's live stream? Her message read. I clicked the link Lila attached. The video had only been live a few minutes, but it already had nearly 5,000 viewers. Rachel sat framed by her familiar studio setup, warm lighting, hair down, slightly smudged mascara. It looked like a perfectly staged portrait meant to evoke sympathy. My sister, she began, her voice trembling, was once the person I loved and wanted to protect the most. But when someone can't control their emotions, they start destroying anything that isn't centered around them. She paused, blinking away tears. Life Prep was a project I built out of gratitude for our grandmother, but now it's been dragged into a legal mess by someone who used to be family. I didn't want to speak up, but I've been pushed to my limit. Comments started popping up under the video. So sad. Family is the hardest thing. She really looks exhausted. I watched the whole live stream and didn't feel angry. Just an eerie calm, as if I were watching a stranger use my story to build a tearful performance. A performance where the audience never sees who cleaned up backstage. I shut the laptop, turned on my reading light, and pulled out the printed will marked with the legal seal. Beneath every line of text were red markings from Marla. She had clearly noted the clauses, enforceability, and witness verification. I picked up the phone and called her. Rachel has made her move, I said when I heard her voice. I know, she replied, voice low and steady. She filed for your site to be taken down under claims of brand confusion. But we're preparing a counter based on the will, and I just received a scanned original document from the court. It's valid for filing a counterclaim. I went silent for a moment. She's not just attacking your reputation, Marla continued. She's obstructing your ability to conduct independent education by misusing legal tools. If needed, we can take this case public. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I don't want revenge, I said slowly. I just want back what's mine. And to keep working. We'll handle the law, she answered. You focus on what you do best. I hung up and sat quietly on the edge of my bed. At my feet were stacks of documents pinned to the wall, evidence strung together like a web I'd woven day by day. But I didn't feel tired. Because unlike Rachel, I didn't need to cry on camera. I had proof. And I had every reason to keep going. I turned the laptop back on and drafted emails to each student who had been affected. I attached offline study guides, sent out personalized lesson packets. At the end of each message, I simply wrote, "We're taking a short break from online classes, but the learning never stops. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I hit send. No hesitation, no pause. Because I knew when they used tricks to take down my platform, I would rebuild it from scratch with the one thing they could never duplicate: trust. I don't know exactly what triggered the shift, but I know it didn't come from me. All I know is that morning, as I sat in my usual cafe near the library, checking the list of students who had submitted their assignments, a message from Emily appeared. "You need to see this," she wrote, attaching a Google Drive link. I tapped the screen. The first file was a screenshot of a conversation between Rachel and someone named Laura. "Use Sarah's old site layout," Rachel wrote. "Don't make it too different. Keep the gray, orange, serif font. Just make it look similar." I recognized the name Laura. She had been a communications intern for Rachel 2 years ago. That Drive folder contained a whole collection of documents, including LifePrep's website architecture, a source file for the curriculum pitch deck with a note that read, "Based on SW 2019 materials," and screenshots of Rachel instructing her team to copy it in a way Sarah can't sue. I leaned back in my chair. The morning light filtered through the window, casting a glow on the steaming coffee in front of me. The feeling wasn't rage, and it wasn't hurt anymore. It was confirmation, deep in my core. I wasn't the only one who knew the truth. An hour later, I received an email from an independent journalist named Marissa. She said she was investigating a story about intellectual property disputes in education, and that a blog post titled, "How Sarah Saved My College Dream" had started getting attention. I clicked the link she sent. On screen appeared a long, heartfelt post. The author was Megan Carver, a former student I once taught in a free class at the public library 2 years ago. In the post, Megan wrote about the days she felt disappointed in herself, about failing her first scholarship interview, and about the night she received an email reply from me close to midnight. She wrote, "Miss Sarah was the first person who didn't ask me why I failed, but instead asked, 'Did you believe you were enough? Did you use your own language or someone else's when you wrote your essay?'" She described the 3 months of study, the practice sessions on black and white photocopied sheets, and the feeling of being called a capable student for the first time. The post was shared more than 7,000 times, with hundreds of comments from students I had once taught. One person wrote, "I studied with Miss Sarah in a community class at the YMCA. Another said, "I didn't know she had her ideas stolen, but if that's true, then whoever stole them also stole the soul of this program." I sat there for a long time, reading each line not out of surprise, but because of the silence. For the first time, it wasn't silence as defense, but as acceptance. My phone began to buzz nonstop. A stream of emails came from journalists, educational organizations, progressive education bloggers. They asked if I was ready to share my story. Some invited me onto podcasts. Others even sent draft scripts for short films. I didn't respond to any of them. I just read. Then I turned off the screen. I wasn't silent out of fear. I was silent because I had already said everything that needed to be said through actions, through lessons, through the curriculum, through every unpaid hour of tutoring. I didn't need cameras to validate the value of my work. I didn't need hashtags to prove I was present. I returned to my rented room late that night. The air smelled faintly of damp wood after the rain, drifting in through the window. I spread out the evidence board I had, pinned together over the past few weeks. At the center was my grandmother Evelyn's will. To the left were the academic materials. To the right were Marla's legal notes. I pinned up a printed photo from Megan's blog with the headline, "She didn't just help me get into college. She made me believe I deserved it." I held the photo for a while. What I felt wasn't pride, but something deeper, like the feeling of someone touching your shoulder in a crowd and saying, "I still see you." That night, I didn't write anything new. I just sat at the table, hands around a cup of cold tea, staring at the wall. In my head, my grandmother's voice echoed, gentle yet firm. They can take everything from you: reputation, place, recognition. But if you hold on to your belief in yourself, they cannot win. I nodded softly, whispering aloud, "See, Grandma? I'm still doing what you taught me." And I knew then the truth didn't need to shout. It only needed to exist long, enough to resonate. And that resonance could never be silenced. The next morning, I was at the city library, sitting in a quiet corner on the second floor with a stack of documents to organize for Marla, when my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. No name, no recognizable area code. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Hello, Miss Sarah Whitmore. This is Stephen Granger, legal representative for R.E. Whitmore Holdings." His voice wasn't hurried, not overly formal, but calm in that carefully trained way. Tone often used to introduce a proposal that everyone knows is more than words on paper. "I hope we can put an end to all of this without involving more parties." I didn't respond. He paused, then continued. "We've drafted a formal proposal, made in good faith. Not because my client feels weakened, but because we don't want to cause further damage to the family relationship." That phrase, family relationship, made me sit up, straighter in my chair. "What do you want me to do?" "We are offering financial support in the amount of $350,000, he said clearly. "Along with it comes a permanent non-disclosure agreement, deletion of all digital evidence, removal of all posts, and a commitment not to use the name Evelyn in any future public educational work." I let out a quiet laugh without sound. "And in return," I asked, "I have to give up all the curriculum I created, don't I?" "The materials will remain with Life Prep, under the current brand. If you agree, you will be credited as an initial contributor but will not retain any public ownership rights." So I'm erased from history. A shadow that once existed. He stayed silent. That silence was confirmation. "We'll need your response within 48 hours, he added, "because Life Prep's investors are requesting clarity on the legal situation before moving forward with funding." I hung up without another word. Less than 10 minutes later, a confirmation email arrived, attaching the offer, nearly 20 pages of NDA, and a draft transfer slip from a Texas bank. I printed out the documents and sat reading in silence for an hour. The language was polished, neutral on the surface, framed as cooperation. But line by line, it was all restriction. No sharing information, no referencing data, even with proof, no reusing original material, even though it was my creation. And most of all, no mentioning Evelyn's name in any educational platform I might build in the future. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted to erase every link between me and the woman who raised me, trusted me, and entrusted me with the legacy she built her whole life. I set the folder aside and reopened my grandmother's letter. Her handwriting glowed softly on the page. "You don't need to be seen by others to know what you've sown. But if they try to erase you from the path you built, then stand up. Not to take back, but to hold." I stood and walked out of the library as the sun slanted down the street. Inside, I felt no more chaos, no more wavering. That evening, I sat at my table and placed 2 documents side by side. One was the copyright certificate confirming my curriculum ownership. The other was the NDA they had sent. I took a photo. No face. No long caption. Just papers on a wooden table under warm light, and beneath it, in my own handwriting, "Silence isn't safety. It's erasure." I posted the image to my page. No hashtags. No tags. Then I turned off the phone, poured a cup of ginger tea, and opened the window to let the night air in. I didn't wait for responses. I didn't wait for praise or shares. Because I didn't write that line to prove I was strong. I wrote it because I had lived believing silence was the highest form of maturity, until I understood. Silence could be used to erase you from history. And I would not be silent anymore. not out of a desire to fight, but because I was calm enough to exist without asking permission. The quiet step center opened quietly, with no banners, no speeches. I rented a small space in an old converted warehouse in the east side of the city, where rent was low, the morning light was beautiful, and the neighbors were artists, potters, community yoga teachers, people who lived on the margins, but who had never stopped creating. The room was only about 400 square feet, with old red brick walls left exposed. I painted the ceiling white and hung long cords of round bulbs so the light would spread evenly across every corner. I bought the tables and chairs from a second-hand market, cleaned them myself, and repainted each one. Some still had students' names etched underneath in ballpoint pen. I didn't erase them. I covered them with a layer of clear plastic as a way of keeping life preserved beneath the scratches. The funding came from a nonprofit that specialized in supporting independent educational projects. They had read Megan Carver's post and seen the photo I shared. When their representative, Judith Lawrence, called me, I almost thought it was a wrong number. "We don't fund for publicity," she said. "We fund because we see in you a form of education that doesn't make noise, but lays down something real." I named the center Quiet Steps, steps that didn't need to stomp, didn't need to shatter silence, but were steady enough to move forward and leave a trace behind. The students came from everywhere. Some were children of laid-off factory workers. Some lived with their grandmothers after divorces. Some had been suspended from school for fighting, but in truth, they were defending friends from bullies. I didn't ask much about their backgrounds. I only asked, "What do you feel you've learned? And what do you feel you need in order to understand more deeply?" There was no bell in class. We began by sitting around a round table, reading a short passage, and sharing thoughts. Only then would we move into test prep, reading comprehension, test strategies, essay writing. I didn't follow a rigid syllabus. I followed each child as if they were their own map, waiting to be drawn. One day, Joshua, the boy who always sat by the window, quiet, always holding headphones he never turned on, handed me his college essay. He wrote, "I grew up in a family without noise, but not because it was peaceful. Because everyone hid their fears in silence. Here, I've learned that silence doesn't have to be a hiding place. It can be the ground to build something else not loud, but truly my own." I printed his essay and pinned it on the wall behind my desk where Evelyn's will already hung, alongside thank you letters from students, and a note I had written one rainy night when nothing had started yet. "You are not a problem, you are a blueprint." I wrote that line not just for my students, but for myself. To remind myself I wasn't born to please anyone. I was born to build what I believe is right. No one in my family reached out after I posted that photo. No messages, no calls, not a word even as the news of life prep being investigated made it into local papers. I heard the center had to shut down temporarily, its accounts frozen for using materials of unclear origin. Some former staff walked away. A few even went public, writing about how Rachel used family influence to keep them under control. I didn't comment, not because I was noble, but because I was no longer on the same map. What I was building no longer connected to what they had chosen to hold on to. One late autumn afternoon, Judith came by. She brought a box of homemade apple pie and a book on the philosophy of liberal education. "I've never seen a place like this," she said, walking through the classroom, looking at the student artwork hung along the hallway walls. "Because this place isn't built on the sound of teaching," I replied. "It's built on the inner voices of each child." She nodded. "Where there are people willing to listen, there is hope." At the guest table, she noticed the paper pinned behind me and asked, "When did you write that?" "I wrote it when I was close to giving up," I said. "I thought if I was the problem, then I should disappear. But then I realized I wasn't wrong. I was just a blueprint no one else knew how to read." She smiled, then placed her hand on my shoulder. "And you chose not to be erased from your own design." That evening, I stayed late to wipe down the board and reorganize the borrowed books. The wind picked up, the streetlight outside spilling through the long front window. reflecting against the wall covered with old and new papers, each one a piece of evidence, a milestone, a heartbeat no one could deny. I didn't need to stand on a stage for someone to clap. I only needed to keep sitting at this table with the children who once thought they didn't deserve to belong, because sometimes simply existing is the strongest way to answer those who thought you should disappear. And me, I was still here, quiet but steady. And what about you? If you were me, would you choose silence to keep the peace? Or would you stand up, knowing the price might be a permanent break with those who once called themselves family? Life doesn't always split neatly into right and wrong, but there are moments when we must choose to stand with the truth, even if the path is lonely, even if our voice feels small against the noise. I'm not telling this story to complain or to beg for sympathy. I'm telling it for anyone who has ever been dismissed, pushed aside in their own family, so they'll know your existence matters. No one has the right to strip away your voice, your dreams, or the worth you've built with your whole heart. If this story touches something in you, even just a corner, share your thoughts. I want to listen, not to argue, but to connect, to remind us that none of us are truly alone in the journey of redefining ourselves. And if you believe there are still stories worth telling of endurance, of rising again, and of the quiet but profound truths within family life, follow this channel. I'll keep being here, telling the stories that sometimes only the heart can truly understand.